The first thing I noticed was the shine. The building didn't just look expensive, it felt like it was judging you for not being. 27 floors of mirror glass and ambition sharp enough to cut through silence. Halberd and Chase Consulting. I'd memorized the name the night before, practicing it under my breath like it was a password into a better life. At 8:47 a.m., I walked into the lobby trying to look like I belonged. Men in suits typed furiously, pretending to be late. Women rehearsed their smiles in their reflections. And me, the intern no one ever remembered hiring, clutching my badge like it was proof I existed. It always worked when I tapped it, so I must belong, right? The 27th floor was where dreams came to die under fluorescent lights. Glass walls, fake plants, voices that rose when the CEO walked by. I sat near the printer, not next to it, but close enough to be useful. The kind of spot that says, "I'm here, but don't worry, I won't take up space." "Hey, could you grab me another oat latte?" someone asked that morning. I said sure. "Thanks, Alex."
Right.
Alex. By the time I came back, they'd already forgotten. That was my name's first death of the day. Meetings blurred together, the same faces, the same words, synergy, pivot, optimize. People spoke like ideas were currency, and silence meant poverty. I took notes, nodded at the right times, laughed once, too late. No one noticed. Somewhere between let's table that and circle back, I realized invisibility could be a kind of power. People spoke freely when they forgot you were there. And I was good at being forgotten. At 11:06, someone from HR stopped by my desk, voice bright and brittle. "How's your internship experience so far?" "It's going well," I said. "Great. Remember, you're part of the Halberd family now." She smiled like she was signing off a voicemail, then walked away without waiting for an answer. Lunch was the loneliest part. The other interns drifted into louder groups. I stayed in the corner, sandwich, notebook, earbuds that weren't playing anything. I called it studying, not loneliness. Every note in that notebook was a quiet autopsy of the office. Never underestimate who refills the printer ink. They see everything. The person who says circle back never circles back. It wasn't bitterness. It was data. Observation was my rebellion. When everyone left at 6:30, after announcing loudly how late they were staying, I stayed too. Not for approval, but because the office after hours was honest. That's when I saw it, an open spreadsheet on a glowing screen. Raven_P3_Q2_ projection, XLSX. Numbers that didn't add up. Forecasts that lied. Someone had turned wishful thinking into revenue. I wasn't supposed to care. I was just the intern. But something about it, the arrogance of it, burned. So I fixed it.
No signatures.
No credit. Just clean numbers, the way they should have been. Then I saved the file, turned off my lamp, and caught my reflection in the elevator glass.
Blurred. Fading.
Like someone mid-disappearance. The next morning, whispers filled the office. Someone had corrected a major discrepancy overnight. The executives called it a miracle, the kind that made powerful people nervous. In his office, the CEO scrolled through the edit log. At the bottom, edited by 8 Rivers. He smiled. And somewhere below, I was making another cup of coffee, completely unaware that a quiet correction had just changed my story forever. Red heart, if you've ever worked hard and still felt unseen, this one's for you. For every intern who stayed late, every quiet soul mistaken for weak, every dreamer who built in silence. Hit like if you've ever been underestimated. Comment if you've felt invisible. And subscribe because sometimes the ones they overlook are the ones already rewriting the story. By the second month, I'd stopped introducing myself in the elevator. Names at Halberd and Chase decayed faster than milk left out overnight. Unless you were on a client invoice or a meeting calendar, you didn't exist. I was neither. So I learned the choreography. Stand diagonally behind the senior staff when the doors open. Avoid blocking their line of sight to executives. Speak only if someone remembers you exist. Elevator etiquette here was practically sacred scripture, hierarchy disguised as politeness. When the door slid open on 27, a senior consultant brushed past me, eyes glued to his phone. "Double espresso, no sugar," he muttered. Not to me, but to the air.
I made it anyway.
That's how these things start. One small assumption, repeated enough times, becomes your identity. The coffee machine was the office's one democratic institution. Everyone used it, no one cleaned it. It hissed and sputtered like a tired dragon, surrounded by lipstick-stained mugs and the smell of burnt ambition. I used to think fetching coffee was humiliation. Later, I realized it was reconnaissance. Everyone dropped their guard near caffeine. The caffeine queue was where secrets leaked, where hierarchies softened just long enough to eavesdrop. One Tuesday, the head of operations walked in mid-call, pointed vaguely at the counter, and said, "Hey, intern, top me up?" I did.
Once.
By Thursday, it became, "Alex, make me one of those flat whites you do." By the following week, "Coffee, please." Repetition is reputation in this place, and mine had brewed itself nicely. The cafe downstairs, grounded logic, became my second office. It was the kind of place that made irony part of the menu. That day's chalkboard read, "Today's special, burnout with a hint of vanilla." The baristas knew me by sight. 12 coffees, all customized, all for people too busy to fetch their own humanity. "Corporate hurt again?" one teased. "Something like that," I said, arranging the trays. By the 12th order, I could hear the rhythm, steam, pour, tap, hiss. It was musical, almost comforting. Back upstairs, the same people who couldn't remember my name smiled when their orders appeared on time. "Reliable kid," they'd say. "Good energy." That word again. Energy. At Halberd and Chase, energy meant smiling while being dismissed, enthusiasm in the face of invisibility. My chair drifted further from the meeting table as the weeks passed. I type minutes from the corner now, translating corporate nonsense into bullet points. We need scalable ideation. Let's double-click on that. Client centricity is key. I wrote, nodding where intelligence should be. Sometimes they threw me crumbs. "Alex, set up a poll." "Alex, take the action items." Always followed by, "Alex, grab me another coffee?" That one usually got a laugh. But invisibility has advantages. From the margins, you see everything. The eye rolls, the private Slack messages, the way a junior analyst deflated when her idea was stolen. Power has a dialect, and I was becoming fluent. I learned that transparency was code for "we're hiding something carefully." That quick question emails were declarations of war. That teamwork appeared most in sentences that ended with blame. Satire wasn't hidden here. It was wearing business casual and carrying an access badge. Then came Daryl, our innovation manager. He strutted into creative sync with a PowerPoint titled Innovation. Think outside the box. 40 minutes of noise, 0 new ideas. When he was done, he glanced at me and said, "Hey, could you run down for that vanilla cold brew? You know how I like it." He winked like we shared a joke. We didn't. But I smiled anyway, corporate survival reflex. "Get one for yourself too," he called after me. Company spirit. One overpriced coffee on the company card. The currency of silent compliance. The corridor to the elevator was lined with glass plaques. We empower people. Every voice matters. Innovation starts with you. Every time I passed them, I wanted to laugh. They were beautiful lies, backlit and laminated. By the 3rd month, Coffee Runner had become my unofficial title. Sometimes it came with a smile. "You're a lifesaver, Alex." Sometimes a joke, "Senior coffee executive." Mostly, it came with silence and an empty cup lifted slightly in my direction. And I understood. One night, long after the office emptied, I sat beside the printer again. That's when I saw it, another file. Quarterly financials, again too clean, too perfect. So, I wrote a script. A small, silent one. Code that scanned for errors, fixed them, and logged each correction. I called it Integrity Check _V1. No credit. No name. Just function. By morning, The finance team was celebrating their flawless automation. Daryl took the praise, of course. I just sipped the coffee I'd fetched for him and said nothing. Sometimes revenge doesn't need flames. Just proof. Now they called me a team player. Always willing to help out. Knows their place. They didn't realize how much room there is when no one's watching. The loud ones performed competence. The quiet one was learning control. Up in his glass-walled office, the CEO paused mid-email. 2 system edits caught his eye. Raven_P3 corrections, 8 Rivers. Integrity check initialized, 8 Rivers. He tapped his pen thoughtfully. Interesting, he murmured. And somewhere below, I was making another coffee, already one step ahead. For everyone who's ever been called just an intern. Hit like if you've ever been underestimated. Comment if you've done the work and watch someone else take credit. And subscribe because one day, they'll have to say your name. The email came without a subject or signature, just 3 words. Come to 27B. I almost ignored it. There were plenty of 27s in this building, 27th floors, rooms, and meeting suites, but 27B meant something else. It was internal code for the CEO's office. Marcus Vale's office. The man himself existed in rumor more than in person, part executive, part myth. He didn't attend meetings. Meetings happened around him. His time was rumored to be segmented into 5-minute units, guarded by a personal assistant who moved like a bouncer in heels. He had a private elevator, a private entrance, and a reputation for seeing everything without ever being seen. So when I saw the sender, veiled m@halberdchase.com, I assumed it was a prank. Still, at 9:03 a.m., I found myself outside the glass door marked Marcus Vale, Chief Executive Officer. Inside, the office didn't look like a workspace. It looked like wealth's reflection. Floor-to-ceiling windows bled sunlight across steel and marble. Bookshelves lined with leadership Bibles and rare first editions. An espresso machine that probably had its own stock options. Marcus Vale sat behind his desk, glasses low on his nose, scrolling through a spreadsheet. He didn't look up when he spoke. Your Rivers, correct? My voice caught slightly. Yes, sir. Alex Rivers. The intern. He said it without mockery, more like he was reading a new variable in an equation. He turned the monitor toward me. These figures, he said, tapping the screen. Who corrected them? I did. I admitted quietly.
Twice.
I nodded. The formulas were inconsistent. He leaned back, studying me. Not my resume, not my posture, but the pause between my words. The thing about inconsistencies, he said, is that most people ignore them if it's not their job. I didn't respond. I couldn't tell if it was a compliment or a test. Then he smiled, the kind that never reached the eyes but carried weight anyway. I like people who fix things that aren't their job. He let the silence linger just long enough before asking. Tell me, Alex, what do you actually want to do here? For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. No one had ever asked me that before. I'd been told what to do, asked to fetch, to note, to copy, to carry, but never to want. I want to understand how it all fits together, I said slowly. How decisions actually get made. That made him look up, properly this time. So you're curious, he said. Observant. I corrected softly. A small grin. Even better. The meeting lasted 7 minutes. 7 minutes that somehow bent time. When I stepped back into the hallway, the fluorescent light felt different, brighter, sharper, like something invisible had tilted in my direction. People noticed, of course. They always do when an intern walks out of the CEO's office. Probably a data issue. Or he wanted a coffee. Maybe she fixed his printer. By lunchtime, rumors were already fully staffed. That night, I stayed back late again. The office felt like an aquarium after dark, glowing, silent, eerily alive. I sat at my desk staring at the Raven_P3 file. Not fixing it this time. Just thinking about the way Marcus Vale had asked that question. What do you actually want? Like a man remembering how curiosity used to feel. Up close, leadership didn't look powerful. It looked tired. And I realized something. Every system, no matter how vast, still depended on someone quiet enough to see its flaws. The next morning, another email. Subject: if you have 5 minutes. From Veiled m@halbertchase.com. 5 minutes turned into 20. He asked my opinion on a project, a supply chain analytics dashboard that had stalled for months. I rewrote 2 assumptions, streamlined the logic, and doubled its efficiency. He said nothing, just nodded once, that slight smile returning. The next day, the project became the centerpiece of the executive meeting. No one knew who had fixed it. Marcus didn't say. But when I passed him in the corridor later that week, he looked up from his phone and nodded once, a subtle, deliberate acknowledgement. The kind of nod that says, "I see you." And in a place where being seen was currency, that one nod felt like a fortune. By the end of the week, my inbox looked different. The requests had shifted. "Could you look over this dataset? Marcus mentioned you're good with numbers. Quick question about that projection." The coffee orders still came, but quieter now, like a fading habit no one wanted to admit. Something had changed, even if they didn't see it yet. The invisible intern had become a variable in the company's equations. And Marcus Vale, who had built an empire on reading people, had finally met the one person no one else could read at all. The first time I was invited to stay after hours, it didn't even feel like an invitation. It was 7:46 p.m., the kind of hour when even ambition starts to yawn, and the office was mostly dark. A single email appeared. From Veiled m@halbertchase.com. Subject: you're still here.
Body. Good.
Bring your laptop. I stared at it for a few seconds. Then I picked up my bag and walked toward 27B again. Marcus Vale was on the couch this time, jacket off, sleeves rolled. The skyline behind him glowed blue and white, that cold, expensive light that makes people look honest. 2 untouched coffees sat on the table between us. "You ever notice," he began, eyes still on the windows, "that this place looks most honest when everyone's gone?" I didn't answer right away. I'd already learned he liked silence. It made him fill it. "Daytime is all performance," he said finally. "Hierarchy. Meetings. People pretending to agree.
But at night, it's just systems.
Raw data. The only truth in this company is in the spreadsheets." He nodded toward my laptop. "Show me how you corrected the Raven model." I opened the file. The cursor blinked against the dark screen, waiting. He watched in silence, no praise, no interruption, just focus so sharp it made my hands slow down. After a while, he said quietly, "Most analysts would have fixed the numbers. You fixed the assumptions." "Numbers lie if people do," I said. That made him smile, a rare, real smile. I remember that line. That night became the first of many. Once a week, sometimes twice, the messages would come. 5 minutes. Still in the building? Bring the report. They weren't meetings, there were no agendas, no slides, no applause. Just ideas. Questions. Silence thick enough to think inside. He'd test me like an engineer testing a bridge, one scenario at a time. What happens if the market collapses 8%? How would you reorganize logistics? If I fired every middle manager tomorrow, what breaks first? I never had the perfect answers, but I always had an honest one, and somehow, that was enough. But nothing at Halberd and Chase stays secret for long. By the 3rd week, the whispers started again. The intern's getting private sessions with Vale. Must be good at coffee. Or something else. Daytime was all performance, nighttime, all suspicion. And Evelyn Hart, the COO, noticed everything. She never confronted him, of course. Evelyn didn't deal in confrontation. She dealt in implication. Little remarks in meetings like, "Our interns are getting quite engaged lately."
Or,
"It's nice to see the CEO taking such a personal interest in junior staff." Every word polished and weaponized behind a polite smile. Marcus never reacted. He didn't do reactions, just recalculations. But I could tell it irritated him. Not because of the gossip, he didn't care about that, but because it meant he wasn't the only one watching anymore. One night, after another quiet session, he shut his laptop and said, "You realize people are starting to talk." I looked up. They talked before I did anything worth talking about.
He almost laughed.
You sound like someone who's been here for years. I listen. Listening's underrated, he said, sipping his cold coffee. Most people wait to talk. You listen to understand. Then he paused, that calculating stillness again before adding, You know what separates an intern from a leader? I waited. It's not the title. It's proximity to truth. He stood, collected his notes, and said, Keep close to truth, Rivers. The rest is noise. The phrase stuck to me like static. Proximity to truth. It echoed in my head during elevator rides, budget calls, even waiting for the bus. In a company addicted to image, truth was contraband, dangerous, addictive, impossible to unsee. By the next month, my access quietly expanded. New folders appeared on my dashboard. Confidential reports. Internal memos. Projects interns weren't supposed to touch. No one said it out loud, but I could feel it. Marcus Vale had decided something. He hadn't chosen me officially, but silently. The way powerful men plant seeds for storms they think they can control. And yet, walking home at night through the glass reflections of the city, I couldn't tell if I was being mentored or tested. Maybe both. Maybe that's the same thing. When your boss starts teaching you the rules, sometimes it's because he's afraid you'll learn how to break them better. It started, as these things often do, with polite disbelief. By Monday morning, the office grapevine had found a new obsession. The intern was spending time with the CEO after hours. Not officially, of course. Nothing in the company calendar said so. But at Halbert and Chase, patterns spoke louder than policy. Someone from finance claimed they'd seen me leaving the executive floor past 9. Someone from HR swore they overheard Vale asking for the intern's projections. And someone, always someone, said they'd seen me holding a file marked confidential. Board prep. By lunch, it was theory. By Friday, it was gospel. They say the intern's rewriting the product roadmap. Or running a secret project for Vale. No, I heard he's grooming them for strategy. Strategy?
Please.
Probably a PR stunt. No one believed it. But no one didn't believe it either. That's the corporate sweet spot, skepticism with envy's aftertaste. I stayed quiet. Came in early, left late, avoided eye contact. Meanwhile, my reports began showing up in places interns' names didn't belong. The board packet, the executive brief, the CEO's deck. Each time, Marcus Vale presented my analysis without credit. The way painters layer a hidden sketch beneath a finished portrait. But in small ways he acknowledged me. A pause before a word. A nod across a room. A silence that said more than any compliment could. Still, the glass walls began to close in. Halbert and Chase was a cathedral of transparency. Everything visible, nothing known. And I learned the truth. Transparency is just surveillance wearing idealism's cologne. Every movement felt watched. Every conversation paused when I entered. Emails arrived slower. Invites got lost. Even casual hellos came with that faint stiffness. The way people greet someone whose lottery ticket might actually be real. Departments that once ignored me suddenly needed input. People who dumped work now CC'd just for visibility. Executives who couldn't remember my name now practice saying it with admiration. Alex, right? You've got a sharp eye for systems. Vale really respects your diligence. We should grab coffee sometime. I'd love your perspective. It was a corporate renaissance, the kind that happens when potential power becomes contagious. But beneath the smiles was fear. Because every company, no matter how polished, runs on one equation. If someone rises, someone else must fall. Marcus noticed the tension and enjoyed it. During our next 5-minute session, he said, You've noticed the noise, haven't you? I nodded. Hard not to. Good, he said. Noise means movement. He leaned forward. They don't hate you, Rivers. They hate the possibility that you might matter. It wasn't comfort. It was instruction. He handed me a thin file. Internal audit, redline projects. This was meant to die quietly, he said. Fix it. Present at Friday. It's Tuesday evening, I replied. He smiled. That's why it's a test. So it began. 3 nights of no sleep, 2 broken spreadsheets, one intern working in the hollow hours when the city's skyline turns from silver to ash. When I finished, I'd traced invisible leaks in revenue missed by 5 managers and 2 directors. One of the leaks led to Evelyn Hart, the COO. The presentation was silent, surgical. The inflated projections, I said, disguised a 2.3% loss over 6 quarters. Evelyn's pen froze mid-click. That's a serious accusation, she said. Not an accusation, I replied. Just math. Marcus Vale didn't interrupt. He didn't need to. He watched, a king testing how far his shadow could reach. After the meeting, Evelyn brushed past me in the hallway. Her smile was polished. Her voice was glass. You're making friends quickly, she said. Truth does that, I answered. She laughed softly. Careful. Around here, truth has an expiration date. That evening, Marcus stopped by my desk. They're underestimating you again, he said. He turned to leave, then paused.
Good.
That's when people are most useful. Outside, rain smeared the city lights into watercolor. Inside, whispers became strategy. By week's end, my audit had reached the board for review. By month's end, Evelyn Hart had been reassigned to a strategic advisory role abroad. And on the executive floor, a door that had always been closed was now quietly, permanently, left ajar. Every empire has a moment when the crown starts looking for a new head. Halberd and Chase is never quiet at 8 a.m. But that morning, even the building seemed to hold its breath. The quarterly board presentation wasn't just a meeting, it was ritual. Assistants whispered like choir boys before a sermon. Executives rehearsed confidence in mirrored glass. The air conditioning carried the twin smells of coffee and fear. And somewhere in the middle of all that choreography, I sat at my desk, adjusting the cracked hinge of my laptop. 72 hours earlier, Marcus Vale had said the sentence that detonated my week. You're presenting the audit to the board. Alone. I thought he was joking. Then the calendar invite arrived. Halberd and Chase Board of Directors meeting. Presenter, A. Rivers, audit findings and strategic recommendations. No department. No title. Just my name, like a test I didn't remember signing up for. At 8:43 a.m., I stepped into the elevator to the 27th floor. The air changed up there, thinner, colder, more curated. The lights were too white, the silence too deliberate. By the time I reached the boardroom, my heartbeat had synced with the hum of the projector. The room itself was designed to intimidate. A 20-foot oak table, 12 matching chairs, glass walls that made you visible but never safe. 12 directors sat waiting, each one a different shade of polished indifference. At the head of the table, Marcus Vale scrolled through his phone like the meeting was background noise. When I entered, conversation paused, not long enough to be rude, but long enough to remind me interns were supposed to knock. Marcus said lightly. Our presenter has arrived. Evelyn Hart's old seat sat empty, her nameplate gone as if she'd never existed. I connected my laptop, and the company logo bled onto the screen. Good morning, I began, my voice steadier than my hands.
I'm Alex Rivers.
I was asked to review audit discrepancies for the Redline Projects Division.
No pleasantries. No flattery.
Just the truth, stripped of sugar. What you'll see today isn't just numbers, I said. It's assumptions, the kind that hide in plain sight. The first slide showed neat, steady growth. The next, recalculated correctly, fell apart. The line nosedived like a secret exposed. A murmur rippled across the table. For 6 quarters, I continued, we've reported stability while quietly absorbing inefficiencies. It wasn't malice, just comfort. The system rewarded optimism more than accuracy. Marcus finally looked up. His eyes were unreadable. If we adjust for true costs, I said, the company's performance still holds, just not where we've been looking. The next slide, a heat map of red and gold, glowed on the wall like a confession. Real efficiency doesn't come from cutting people, I said quietly. It comes from correcting the stories we tell ourselves about success. That line hung in the air like smoke. In a room built on illusion, truth felt almost obscene. Carlton Wexler, the CFO, cashmere suit, colder heart, leaned forward. Are you suggesting our accounting has been dishonest? No, I said. I'm suggesting it's been comfortable. The silence that followed could have sliced glass. Even the vents stopped humming. Then Marcus chuckled, low, deliberate. Comfort, he said. That's a dangerous word around here. He gestured for me to continue. Go on, Rivers.
I did.
I showed them the projections, automation, restructuring, redirected budgets. The kind of analysis that could make a career. Or destroy one. If implemented, I said, Halbert and Chase can regain 4.6% profit within 3 quarters, without a single layoff. But it means confronting the parts of our model we stopped questioning years ago. When I finished, no one spoke.
No applause.
Just the quiet clicks of laptops closing, the sound of judgment disguised as order. One by one, they left. All except Marcus. He stayed seated, watching the skyline until I wondered if he'd forgotten I was there. Then he said, without turning, Do you know what you just did? Showed the truth, I said. He smiled faintly at the window's reflection.
No.
You disrupted comfort. He turned then, eyes bright with something sharp. This company runs on predictable lies. You just introduced volatility, and volatility is where real power hides. He slid a folded paper across the table. I opened it. Strategic Growth Task Force Appointment. A. Rivers. Signed, Marcus Vale. Congratulations, he said. You're about to see how the machine really works. When I stepped into the elevator, the door slid shut on the hum of new whispers. The interns on the task force? Vale's lost it. Or maybe he knows something we don't. For the first time, I wasn't invisible anymore. But visibility, I was beginning to learn, came with a price, and the company always collected. The boardrooms smelled like power. Polished wood, stale perfume, and that faint metallic edge of nerves that always clung to days like this. It was supposed to be routine. At least, that's what the calendar said. Quarterly executive meeting, 9 a.m. Nothing unusual. Nothing dramatic. But the moment I walked in, I could feel it, the kind of silence that hums right before lightning hits. The others filed in, as if choreographed. Carlton Wexler with his gold cufflinks and sharper smile. The general counsel with her calm, careful diplomacy. The HR director, carrying moral authority like a designer handbag. They exchanged greetings in that strange corporate dialect of insincerity. How are you? Busy. Good busy or bad busy? Does it matter? And then Marcus Vale walked in.
No jacket. No entourage.
Just a slim folder and that dangerous calm he wore when something irreversible was about to happen. The room fell silent. Let's keep this brief, he said. We've got a transition to discuss. That word, transition, landed like a grenade. Evelyn Hart's absence had been quietly rewritten into fiction. She was consulting abroad. Everyone pretended to believe it. But transition? That meant something was about to move or fall. Carlton spoke first, too cautious to show fear. Marcus, perhaps we should review the agenda. There's no agenda, Marcus said. Not today. He tapped the folder once against the table and looked up. I'm stepping down as CEO. The words hit the room like a gavel. Someone exhaled too loudly. Someone else's pen froze mid-sentence. My pulse stopped keeping time. Effective immediately, Marcus went on. The board has my letter of resignation. And he added almost lazily, my recommendation for successor. For a few seconds, nobody breathed. Then Carlton found his voice again, the kind you use to talk a man off a ledge. Marcus, surely you don't mean. I do, he said simply. We've discussed it privately. Now we'll do it publicly. He opened the folder, slid a single document across the table, and leaned back like a man watching a storm he'd already escaped. Meet your next CEO. Every head turned. And all those eyes, cold, curious, calculating, landed on me. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. It felt like watching someone else's life implode in slow motion. You can't be serious. And in turn, Marcus, this is absurd. There's no precedent for this. Their voices tangled into chaos. I just sat there, pulse hammering behind my ribs, my name, intern, successor, experiment, mistake, ricocheting across the table. Marcus waited until the uproar reached its natural limit. Then he spoke. Exactly.
No precedent.
That's why it might actually work. He stood, voice steady but sharp. Halberd and Chase has spent a decade mistaking visibility for competence. You reward politics, not performance. Optics, not outcomes. Rivers fix more in 6 months than most of you noticed in 6 years. The General Counsel tried to steady the chaos. Marcus, with all due respect, there's a process. Processes, he interrupted, built by the same people who broke the system. Tell me, what's the point of procedure if it only preserves mediocrity? The silence that followed was electric. No one dared to breathe wrong. I finally found my voice, quiet, unsure, almost apologetic. Sir, this isn't. It's already in motion, Rivers, Marcus said gently. Whether you want it or not. He turned back to the board. You all wanted innovation. This is what it looks like, raw, unpolished, and deeply uncomfortable. Then that faint, familiar smirk, like truth. The meeting dissolved into controlled chaos, press statements, minutes rewritten, faces rearranged into corporate calm. By the time it ended, the official summary read consideration of succession planning. Not rebellion, not coup, just bureaucracy pretending it understood history. That evening, the building was silent again. I stood in the CEO's office for the first time. The city stretched beneath me, glass and light and indifference. The nameplate on the desk had already been changed. Alex Rivers, Acting Chief Executive Officer. The words looked unreal. The air in that room felt heavier, more expensive. I ran my fingers across the desk, smooth mahogany, cold as authority, and stared at my reflection in the glass. I looked familiar, but framed by something I didn't recognize. Power. You look like someone who's seen a ghost, Marcus said softly from the doorway. I turned. I feel like one. He smiled, that small, dangerous smile. Good.
Ghosts don't need to be liked.
They just need to haunt the right rooms. He handed me a black keycard, top-level clearance. The company's yours now, he said. Try not to let it own you. And then he was gone.
No speech. No handshake.
Just absence, the kind that rearranges everything it leaves behind. Outside, reporters were already gathering. Inside, executives were already rewriting their loyalties. And somewhere in between, I stood there, the once invisible intern now expected to lead the machine that had tried to erase me. I took a slow breath, straightened my jacket, and walked toward the waiting cameras. That night, the headline hit every screen. Halberd and Chase announces historic leadership change, former intern appointed as CEO. Half the world laughed, half applauded, and all of them watched. The first day after the announcement was strangely quiet.
No confetti. No handshakes.
Just eyes. Dozens of them, darting, studying, measuring. I walked through the marble lobby that morning like someone trespassing on history. The receptionist, who used to wave distractedly while scrolling her phone, now stood as if greeting royalty. The same intern badge that had hung around my neck was gone, replaced by a sleek black access card that opened every door. It felt less like a promotion and more like being handed the master key to a labyrinth. The elevator ride to the top floor was too long. Always too long, 42 seconds of forced reflection. I caught my reflection in the mirror-polished doors, a figure in an ill-fitting suit, still not used to the weight of tailored shoulders. My tie felt like a question mark around my neck. Somewhere between the 25th and 30th floors, my stomach nodded. Do they even want me here? The thought came and went, replaced by another, sharper one. It doesn't matter. I'm already here. When the doors slid open, the silence hit me. Executives who had once ignored me now stood when I entered. Emails that used to take days for replies now arrived within minutes, lined with the polite terror of hierarchy. Yet beneath the courtesy, something darker buzzed, the low-frequency hum of resentment. They smiled too much. agreed too easily. Watched constantly. It was office politics disguised as grace. By noon, I had survived 4 meetings, 5 condescending congratulations, and 1 headline that read, "From coffee to corner office, the viral rise of an intern CEO." The article painted me as a miracle and a meme in the same breath. Polite mockery, a bold experiment in leadership, the future of meritocracy, or corporate madness gone viral. On LinkedIn, old colleagues began rewriting history. Always saw great potential in Alex. Truly inspiring to see hard work rewarded. Some even attached old photos, pretending to have been supportive. The internet was already manufacturing nostalgia for a story barely 24 hours old. Inside the building, however, reality had no filters. By the second day, I noticed what wasn't happening. The chief financial officer, accidentally, left me out of a major strategy call. The HR director sent reports late, always with apologies, never results. The IT department forgot to migrate certain access rights. Each oversight was small, individually harmless, collectively surgical. It wasn't rebellion. It was a polite suffocation. Late one evening, I sat in the CEO's glass-walled office, the city flickering below like data. The hum of servers and air conditioning felt louder now that the applause had faded. My laptop pinged. An anonymous email. Subject: "Welcome to the top." Body: "They're smiling because they want to see how fast you fall."
No signature. No trace.
Just that. I closed the laptop, leaned back, and stared at the skyline. The world below seemed infinite, the office above, claustrophobic. The next morning, Marcus Vale's old office plan arrived, a small fig tree in a ceramic pot. The note attached read, "Survives best with indirect light, like most people."
How?
I laughed softly, the first genuine laugh in days. Then I opened my notebook and began a list titled Quiet Reforms. Stop evaluating employees by hours logged, start by outcomes achieved. End pointless 9 p.m. visibility meetings. Promote 3 middle managers who actually get things done. Disband the innovation committee. They hadn't innovated anything in 5 years. Weekly listening sessions. No titles, no hierarchy, just ideas. It was ambitious. Maybe naive. Definitely dangerous. But it felt like motion, and motion was survival. By the end of the first week, the building had begun to adjust. Some employees watched with curiosity, some with hope, and others, especially the old guard, began plotting the counter-narrative. The intern doesn't understand scale. Good intentions, no backbone. You can't run a billion-dollar company with sentiment. They whispered it in corridors, on golf courses, over after-hours whiskey. That's how old power defends itself, not with violence, but with consensus. One evening, while leaving the building, I overheard 2 employees in the lobby. "It's temporary. They'll bring in a real CEO soon." "Yeah, this is just PR. You'll see." I didn't stop walking, didn't turn around, but the words lodged deep, like splinters of doubt. In the car, I stared out the window, the city reflecting against the glass. It wasn't victory I felt, it was exposure. And yet, beneath that fear, a thin thread of resolve began to tighten. That night, I made one final note in the journal. They built an empire on being seen. I'll build one on being right. Real change never survives without proof, and proof in this world meant numbers. So I began working late nights again, this time, not fetching coffee, but building a new model, a leaner budget, a talent-based incentive system, a 3-year plan that redefined success from quarterly growth to sustainable progress. It was elegant, brutal, and true. It would either save the company or destroy me. By month 3, something unexpected happened. Employees started defending me, publicly. They posted results online, shared before and after metrics, wrote about the new Halberd culture. It was no longer my revolution. It was theirs. The old guard panicked. The board demanded reassessment. And suddenly, that phrase, interim CEO, began circulating again, quietly, like a rumor looking for a home. On a late Friday evening, I stood by the window, the city glittering below like data points on a chart. My reflection was clearer now, not because I'd changed, but because the noise had started to fall away. You can't reform a system by shouting at it, I whispered to myself. You reform it by making it obsolete. I turned off the lights, leaving the office dark except for the glow of the skyline, a quiet revolution, still unfolding. Change, I discovered, never arrives with a trumpet. It starts with an email. A quiet one. No subject line in caps, no, effective immediately. Just subject, a few small adjustments. It went out to the top 30 managers, the ones who actually made the company move, even if no one ever thanked them for it. The email. Team, we've inherited a system that rewards presentation more than progress. Let's start changing that. Department meetings are now capped at 30 minutes. Every Friday, no internal emails after 2 p.m. Promotions will require one anonymous peer review. Try it for a month. Let's see what happens. Alex. It didn't sound radical. But in a company addicted to ritual, even 30 minutes less meeting time felt like heresy. By the end of the week, whispers filled the cafeteria. Is this really happening? No Friday emails? What are we, a yoga studio? Peer reviews? So interns get to judge directors now. It was small, but it was movement. And movement made people nervous. Meanwhile, the old guard gathered, unofficially of course, in the private lounge on the 42nd floor, a place with no cameras and excellent scotch. Carlton Wexler, never one to waste a crisis, leaned back in his leather chair. Our new CEO's enthusiasm is charming, he said, but charm doesn't balance a P&L. The others chuckled politely. Let them play CEO for a while, said another. Sooner or later, the numbers will remind them who really runs this company. They raised their glasses, not in toast, but in quiet collusion. I knew something was brewing. Corporate defiance never stayed hidden for long. It always leaked through behavior. The sudden scheduling conflicts, the polite refusals to align priorities, the memos that went missing. Instead of confronting it, I studied it, like an anthropologist among a tribe of ancient executives. They still believe power is about who speaks the loudest, I wrote in my journal. They haven't noticed I'm changing what people listen to. 2 months in, the data began to shift. Meeting times dropped by 38%. Department reports became shorter and sharper. One intern suggestion saved the logistics team nearly $500,000 in operational waste. I didn't celebrate publicly. I simply sent the intern a note. Excellent insight. Keep thinking like that, quietly. But word spread. And soon, employees started experimenting again, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. Someone created a cross-department Slack channel called Fix It Fridays. Another built an anonymous suggestion form that actually got used. And for the first time in years, people began staying late not out of fear, but because they were curious. The company began to breathe. That's when the counterattack began. A leaked article appeared on a business blog. Is Halberd and Chase's new CEO too inexperienced for the real economy? The piece quoted anonymous executives describing me as idealistic, naive, and dangerously experimental. It spread fast, not because people believed it, but because controversy was currency. The board called an emergency meeting. Optics matter, Alex, said the HR director, with the patience of someone lecturing a student. We need stability right now. We've had stability for 15 years, I replied. And where did it get us? 3 lawsuits, 2 product failures, and 1 cultural obituary. Silence. You're playing with fire, murmured Carlton Wexler. I smiled faintly.
No, Carlton.
I'm just finally turning on the lights. Privately, I knew it couldn't last forever. Real change never survives without proof, and proof in this world meant numbers. So I began working late nights again, this time not fetching coffee but building a new model, a leaner budget, a talent-based incentive system, a 3-year plan that redefined success from quarterly growth to sustainable progress. It was elegant, brutal, and true. It would either save the company or destroy me. By month 3, something unexpected happened. Employees started defending me, publicly. They posted results online. They shared before and after metrics. They wrote about the new Halberd culture. It was no longer my revolution. It was theirs. The old guard panicked. The board demanded reassessment. And suddenly, that phrase, interim CEO, began circulating again, quietly, like a rumor looking for a home. On a late Friday evening, I stood by the window, the city glittering below like data points on a chart. My reflection was clearer now, not because I'd changed, but because the noise had started to fall away. You can't reform a system by shouting at it, I whispered to myself. You reform it by making it obsolete. I turned off the lights, leaving the office dark except for the glow of the skyline, a quiet revolution, still unfolding. The first sign of trouble didn't come from the market. It came from an email. 3 lines.
No greeting. No puntuación.
Critical breach in vendor contract. Legal involved. Press found out. I read it twice. Then once more. The clock on my desk read 5:47 a.m. Outside, the city was still asleep. Inside, Halberd and Chase was waking up to panic. By 8 a.m., the incident had become a full-blown crisis. A partner firm had mishandled client data. Millions of files gone. The internet was already sharpening its knives. The story hit the front page of every major business outlet. Halberd and Chase faces data scandal, leadership under fire. Within hours, the narrative twisted. It wasn't the vendor's failure anymore.
It was my oversight.
The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The same journalists who once praised my rise now dissected it like a lab experiment gone wrong. A noble story meets corporate reality. Idealism crumbles under pressure. When meritocracy meets the balance sheet. It was all so predictable. The board called an emergency meeting again. The air was electric with restrained hostility. Carlton Wexler, pale with vindication, adjusted his tie. We warned you, he said softly. Change is risky. The market doesn't reward experiments. The HR director added, we need to restore confidence. Public confidence, investor confidence, internal confidence. I cut her off. Confidence doesn't come from pretending nothing happened. It comes from fixing what did. A few heads turned. Marcus Vale's old portrait on the wall seemed to be watching. We'll issue a statement, I said. But not a denial. A confession. A what? Wexler blinked. We'll admit what went wrong. We'll explain how. And we'll fix it publicly. There was a collective intake of breath, as if I'd just proposed arson inside a museum. You'll tank the stock, hissed one board member. Then we'll rebuild it on honesty, I replied. That afternoon, the company did something unheard of. We live-streamed a town hall.
No teleprompter. No PR consultant.
Just me, standing behind a plain podium, sleeves rolled up, eyes steady. We failed, I began. Not because of malice, but because of habit. We outsourced responsibility, not just data. We trusted process more than people. And we forgot that transparency isn't weakness. It's the only currency left that still holds value. The speech lasted 8 minutes. When it ended, there was silence. Then applause, hesitant at first, then louder. The board hated it. The employees loved it. The public watched. By midnight, the company's social channels flooded with comments. Finally, someone said it. This is what leadership looks like. The intern gets it better than the executives ever did. It wasn't redemption, but it was real. Weeks passed. The crisis, like all corporate crises, faded from the headlines, replaced by newer, shinier scandals elsewhere. But something had shifted.
Subtly.
Permanently. Meetings became shorter. People started speaking more plainly. Even the board grudgingly began to adapt to my methods. The quiet revolution had survived its first fire. 3 months later, Marcus Vale returned, not in triumph, but curiosity. He walked into the same office he'd once owned and found me standing by the window, reading a report. You didn't burn it down, he said. I smiled. Not yet. Marcus chuckled. You're different. So's the company. He nodded, looking around the space. The portraits of past CEOs had been removed. In their place hung a wall of handwritten notes, suggestions, thank yous, anonymous ideas from employees. At the center was one phrase in bold black ink. No one's invisible here. Marcus studied it for a long moment. You understand what that means now. That visibility isn't a gift, I said quietly. It's a responsibility. He smiled, not the knowing smirk of a mentor, but the rare, sincere expression of someone who knows they've been surpassed. Then I'd say the company's in good hands. He left without ceremony, as always. Months later, analysts began referring to it as the Rivers model, a leadership style that combined radical transparency with quiet authority. The phrase appeared in magazines, business schools, and even TED Talks. Ironically, the same world that once mocked the Intern CEO now treated the story like prophecy. I never attended the conferences or interviews. I preferred staying in the background, the very place I'd once been trapped in. When a young intern once asked, "How did you go from invisible to CEO?" I simply replied, by not trying to be seen, just by refusing to stay unseen. The building changed too. The old executive lounge was turned into a shared workspace. The boardroom got glass walls, literally transparent. And every new hire's orientation began with a single message. You're not here to fit in. You're here to be noticed for the right reasons. One late evening, as lights dimmed and the city below shimmered like a sea of potential, I stood alone by the window again. The reflection staring back no longer looked uncertain. It looked composed, not with arrogance, but with quiet conviction. In the distance, the skyline's towers blinked like competing ambitions. And for the first time, I didn't feel smaller than them, just equal. Months later, a journalist asked in an interview, if you could summarize your leadership in one line, what would it be? I paused, thought for a moment, then said, everyone's chasing visibility. I just built a company where invisibility stopped being a curse. They never saw it coming, not the rise, not the revolution, not the quiet kind of power that doesn't need to shout. I didn't storm the system. I studied it, waited, and then rewired it from the inside out, with silence, not speeches. Because sometimes the most radical thing you can do is show up so completely in your work that the world has no choice but to see you. And that's the truth behind every overlooked intern, every assistant who stays late, every voice that's been ignored because it wasn't loud enough to be heard in a boardroom. Power doesn't always wear a suit. Sometimes it wears uncertainty and keeps going anyway. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or told to wait your turn, this story is for you. Don't forget to subscribe to Everyday Dramas for more stories like this, the kind that turn everyday moments into quiet revolutions. Drop a comment. Have you ever worked somewhere you felt invisible? Let's talk about it.